Welcome to Rates and Barrels. We are back. It is Monday, November 29th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. And I thought when we were making the schedule for the offseason, I thought that the 2 weeks at the end of November was pretty much the safest possible time with a lockout looming to take a couple of weeks off from shows. I was wrong. Actually, we've got like a month's worth of news in the last week or so. We've got mega extensions for players. We've got even a trade to get to. We've got a bunch of free agent signings. The Mets have done more smart things than stupid things during this span. I mean, this is unprecedented times. Before we started recording, I told I feel bad that Britt's not here for transactional news that we like for the Mets because it seems like that would be a very rare occurrence. Britt on vacation. She'll be back soon. But how'd everything go for you while we were gone? I mean, happy Thanksgiving, and thank you again for hosting. It was awesome. How'd everything else go throughout your time off?
I gave up the keg.
Oh, the keg is gone.
I gave up on the keg. But I will say, I thought that near the end, I had about 30% left in the keg. However, after the basting, and then when I decided that I was just going to empty it, I only emptied it for 1 minute and 45 seconds before it was totally empty. So I don't really know my fluid dynamics that well to tell you exactly how many beers that was. But I would say that it could have been less than 10.
I would assume, because if you had to empty an entire keg, I would assume 10 minutes would be at least 10 minutes. I mean, that's with like a lot of pressure and everything too. So yeah, I would say you did more damage on that keg. Good.
Oh, and also an empty keg is heavier. It's been a while since I've interacted with kegs, so an empty keg is a little bit heavier than I expected, So like some of my, oh my God, I'll never finish this was actually just feeling the metal of the keg,
They are surprisingly heavy from, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever the last time was that I actually lifted one.
So my final estimate is there's about 140 beers in a keg, right?
Yep.
My final estimate is that I probably had around 70. And my friends and the party goers had another, 40 or 50.
Yeah, I think I had about 4 of those 40. So
yeah, there you go. Pat yourself on the back. And then I let sort of 10 to 20 go at the end there. So I think that's guys, considering my age and the fact that we're still, we're not like having parties every day at other people's houses here in Northern California. It's still pretty chill on the going out level for Corona. So, I mean, I might have been, if I was a little bit younger and it wasn't Corona, I might have been like, everybody to my house now. We are finishing this keg tonight.
Could have had
boat races with 8% IPAs.
No. Yeah, that would have been gross. I mean, that would have ended in a very, very bad place. But glad the keg was mostly polished off, and thanks again for sharing that. The key to finishing a keg is brining turkeys, though. That's a secret. We weren't thinking about that a few weeks ago. I think maybe we thought the keg would have been gone at that time. But
it was its last donation to my life was brining the turkeys, and the turkeys I thought did well for it. A lot of the instructions on brining say use some malty beer, use like a brown or a stout or something. And in order to get some of that malt taste in there, I don't know, man. The bird to me is an herbal thing. It has all sorts of herbs in it. So I think that the hops in the beer just read as another herb. And it was super juicy. It was a spatchcocked. So like, I don't know, between the spatchcocking and the brining, man, that's my gift to you out there. If you don't think the turkey is good, spatchcock it and brine it and come back.
If this video gets 10,000 likes, we will do a video episode of spatchcocking the turkey in Thanksgiving
so 2022. Gross. That's the one thing about spatchcocking is like my wife is like can't even be in the kitchen when I'm doing it. And I was like, look, kids, I'm ripping out its spine.
Yeah, your kids are at the age where they could think it's really cool, or they could be traumatized and never want to eat meat again. Like they're right on that borderline.
And one of them was like, I don't care, Dad. I was like, all right, you're already a nihilist. Great.
Awesome. I love it.
My 6-year-old is a nihilist.
Well, let's get to the Mets. We'll start there. Tons of stuff happening. We're going to get to as much of it as
Segue
we.
from nihilism right to
Yeah,
the
I
Mets.
felt like that was appropriate. Because if you're a Mets fan, you are much better off as a nihilist than actually
Yeah,
being invested in their ultimate success. But they're doing everything in their power right now to make this team a lot better on paper. The latest of which, it's not confirmed yet, but just as we've started recording, a 3-year, $130 million deal with Max Scherzer. And now it's a bundle, right? It's Scherzer plus Starling Marte plus Mark Canha plus Eduardo Escobar. I saw some people on Twitter getting really excited about Nick Plummer. I think he's now been pushed completely off the radar as like a fourth or fifth outfielder. But we begin with Scherzer, 3 and 130, a nice deal for a pitcher his age, of course, over 40 million per in terms of an average annual value. That is a record. And I think it's pretty clear the Mets believe he can still pitch like a top 5, top 10 pitcher over most, if not all, of that deal.
Yeah, I think that the way that pitcher aging is going these days, pitchers are aging better because they're retaining more of their strikeout ability in this sort of strikeout-rich league that we're in. This is the kind of perfect guy to bet on because his strikeout rate really hasn't waned. Last season was 34.1%. For his career, it's 29%. He really only has done better than he did last season in terms of strikeouts twice in his career. And just barely, maybe 3 times, but just barely. So he's striking everybody out, and that's a great place to start. Now, the homers, I think, have started to come back into his career. I think that's where, the homers and walks is where you'll see the age. But on a 3-year deal, I know that the saying is there's no such thing as a bad 1-year deal. I think that has gone to the point now where the good players get more than a 1-year deal. So I would almost say there's no such thing as a bad 3-year deal at this point. Just because year 1, you probably get what you want. Year 2, if he's injured, you hope it's not the full year injury. And then year 3, if you lose one of those years, it's the price of doing business. Maybe that's not your best season. However, it doesn't hamstring your entire organization for years and years, like something like a Pujols deal, where you're just like, that's dead money for 5 more years, like Eric Hosmer, right? If it's a 3-year deal, it's dead money at worst for a year of it, I think. And so that's why the money's so big. That's why the deal's short. And that's why, I think the Mets fans should be super happy about this deal.
Its depth chart looks a lot more impressive with all the adjustments that have been made already. I mean, the uncertainty around Jacob deGrom is going to linger through spring training, maybe through the early part of the season. There's going to be concerns about his workload if he leaves starts early. All of those things are going to be there, but a lot of that anxiety, just from a fan perspective, even gets reduced because you have Scherzer there. You have 2 aces now. If deGrom is healthy, you've still got 1, even if he's not. And I assume they're still not done. They're going to be looking at that second tier of pitchers, of course. We'll get to Steven Matz a bit later in the show. The Mets thought they had a deal with him, or at least Steve Cohen thought they had a deal with Steven Matz. Turns out, no.
I don't actually love that deal. I think that last year represented the absolute peak for Matz, just in terms of, all the work that he did to improve his pitches, and his fastball still wasn't very good, even at that velo. And he had a really big split between high velo and low velo. And so I think if he drops below 94 at all on an average on his fastball, he's going to be a bad pitcher. So, 4 years, he's the kind of guy I would have loved to give a 1 or 2 year deal to. So if that losing out on Matz had anything to do with with the rest of this, then I would say, hey, good luck to you, Steven Matz. And yeah, the Mets will take Max Scherzer, So, this is also the kind of thing where, if they get lucky health wise, it now becomes a championship type contender team, right? If they get half lucky and they have 1 of deGrom or Scherzer, they can still run it through. We saw with the Braves is that you make the postseason, and then who knows what happens after that. So even if they only have one of Max Scherzer or Jake DeGrom, a team like this could win if they got to the postseason, right? And then, of course, because it's an older team, there is still the risk that they have poor health luck in any given season, and I don't know, possibly don't even make the postseason. I mean, you're talking about Carrasco, DeGrom, and Scherzer. There's a real fair amount of injury risk there.
There is. I think this is an offense, though, that is rapidly improving because of the changes that are being made there. I mean, you had Starling Marte 4 for 78. I thought per year he might get a little more than that. I thought he'd probably top out around 3 years because of his age. But really, I mean, the thing that Starling Marte brings to the table for us as fantasy players, of course, is speed first and foremost, but he brings it with a good average. That average is backed by a good OBP. I know a lot of that OBP has the hit by pitch bump in it, which can be also a bit costly.
And hit BABIP. He has a 344 batting average of balls in play for his career. So a lot of it is results on balls in play, which is tied into his speed. So any injury to his legs might be a significant one for him.
But he'll be a Met through his age 36 season. I think you're really just worried about the next couple seasons, really, the next two. Like, is he still the player you expect him to be for the next two? And then how does he taper off after that? Thinking about how this team is built, their needs in center field, it certainly makes sense. Will he still be a good center fielder at the end of the deal? Doesn't matter.
I don't even know right now. That's the problem. The only problem for me is I saw a headline that was like, they're improving their defense, and I was like, I mean, they're all post peak defensively, and then most of them, at least by outs above average, were below average. So defense is really a really tough thing to improve in free agency. I'm not sure they did it 100%, but they also have really good players, and you'd think with the offense and the pitching clicking, maybe they can look the other way on defense. And in fact, I think that's kind of Sandy Alderson's MO is to kind of not focus on defense.
Marte was still in the 82nd percentile in terms of outs above average in 2021. So it's not like he's bad by any stretch.
Right.
It's above average. So
the sprint speed was still there.
Yeah. So it's unlikely it stays there. It's just
probably better than Nemo or Conforto in center.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I never thought Conforto could play center when he came into the league. I just didn't expect that to be part of his path. But you put Marte in center, it kind of puts Mark Canha, who they just added, in left. Nimmo moves to a corner as well. It kind of puts Dominic Smith in the extra bat spot, which is fine after the year that he just had. And maybe there's some trades still coming with this Mets team. That's a possibility as well. I think when we talked about Canha last, it was a question of which team was going to get a deal, because he's the kind of player that does a lot of things really well and just adds a nice floor to your everyday or near everyday lineup.
Yeah. And it's funny that Canha and Marte, that a large part of their OBP comes from hit by pitches, both of them. Hit by pitches is a skill. It's a skill. It sticks around. I think you're right, though. It's a dangerous skill. It's one that can lead to lots of missed time. Marte just last year, I think the rib injury was a plunk, right?
Believe so, yeah.
And so, and Canha has missed a lot of time. They also don't have great power, either of them. So you're putting them now in a park that suppresses power, honestly. So for fantasy reasons, Canha might actually be the most hurt by any of this, other than like McNeil and Davis and Smith, Dominic Smith, JD Davis, and Jeff McNeil. But Mark Canha, I think, also gets hurt by this because he doesn't have great power. So if you're talking about a guy who might have been, if you gave him full playing time, might have been a guy who hit 240 with 20 homers and 10 steals or something. I think he's more a 15 and 10 guy. And the team hasn't been one that steals a lot. So what if he's like a 15 and 5 guy at 245? I think that's a pretty borderline fantasy player. But for them, probably really good OBP, and he adds depth by, yes, he's the starter, but he pushes McNeil, Davis, and Smith into depth. If there is no NLDH from a real baseball perspective, then I would expect the Mets to trade one of the three, whichever gives them a better prospect return, or maybe Davis or Smith, because they have less positional versatility. And then keep McNeil as kind of a utility guy, along with like your offensive utility guy, and Guillorme is your defensive utility guy. That's a pretty good combination.
Yeah, McNeil can play enough spots where he can function as your first 7 innings utility guy if you want to play it that way. Could be the regular second baseman too, depending on how all the other pieces
fit. Because Cano, that's still sitting there for them to figure out. I would assume that it's kind of a Cano McNeil situation at second, as they figure out if Cano has anything left.
Yeah, and it might just be time to let Robinson Cano go and accept that as a sunk cost at this point too. Eduardo Escobar also a part of this conversation. Now he got a 2-year deal worth $20 million. For now, he's penciled in atop the depth chart at third base, but he moves around. Great fit in the clubhouse. I think he's one of those players that probably, through a sabermetric lens, leaves a little something to be desired, compared to Canha and Marte, who get on base a lot, especially Escobar, even when things are going well, is more of like a 320, 330 OBP guy, and there's certainly risk. You see it in the projection. Steamers got him at a 241, 301, 429 line. I'm actually a little more worried about Escobar going into Citi Field than I am about some of the other players. Like the guys come like Marte coming out of Miami and Oakland and in very pitcher-friendly environments. It might be a slight park upgrade for those guys, but it's a downgrade for someone like Escobar, who's been in Arizona 100%. And at the end of the season was in Milwaukee.
100%. I think he, maybe even hurt more than Canha. You're right, because Canha's been playing in a place that suppresses power as well. So good point there. I also, this is the from a real baseball perspective, this is the signing I like the least, just because I like JD Davis. I think he can hit. I'm not sure that Escobar's defense is so much of an upgrade that it's worth spending that money and pushing Davis back deeper on the depth chart. And then I just see, Escobar's power is slightly soft in terms of, I would project him probably for like a 6% barrel rate next year. And in City, that's going to produce like 20 homers. So now you're talking about a guy that will have average power, below average patience, slightly above average contact, and slightly below average defense. I think it actually all adds up to slightly below average. And that's an interesting thing to kind of spend money on. But that's a picking the nits, really, right? I mean, there's some defensive questions. Maybe the Escobar deal wasn't great, but as a whole, what they did was add a lot of, at least average starters to push some of their other guys into depth pieces, which I think is really smart. And then you can't hate on adding Max Scherzer. So writ large, I like their offseason.
Yeah, I mean, at worst, probably a B+, but probably more realistically, this is an A so far.
Right.
And I don't think they're done. I look at the Mets as a team that, if you said, well, I thought Eduardo Escobar should get 2 for 15. Well, the Mets can afford 2 for 20. They're the team.
Yeah.
If you're sitting at an auction table in fantasy, everyone's got $260 to spend. The Mets have like $360 to spend right now.
Yeah.
So they can hit a couple extra bucks. They can overpay a little bit, and that's fine. We want players to get paid, and it's not going to burn them forever. It's not going to prevent them from doing something else later based on how they seem to indicate that they want to operate.
Right, and it'll also actually probably cause you to maybe fall into some values elsewhere. And the way that I think of it is, think about the fringe player that either will take a minor league deal or a small veteran deal. Say Cole Calhoun, right? If you're Cole Calhoun and you're talking to the Rangers say, well, listen, we're about to sign this guy. They can tell you that kind of thing, right? We're about to sign Marcus Semien. We're not going to end there. We're going to sign John Gray, and we're not going to stop there. We're going to sign a bunch of guys. So you got Donnie Ecker here, who you used to work with in Anaheim. So you've got a great hitting coach that you'd like, and you've got these other stars coming. So come with us on a small deal. I haven't even seen the terms. I'm assuming it's a tiny deal. And then when you're the Mets now, I feel like let's talk about Rich Hill. Rich Hill's going to sign somewhere for like $1 and $4 million, right? $1 and $3 million, less than what he did last year, but still something that he can help out and give you guys, 90 to 100 innings of decent work, right? He's still like third in among free agents and stuff. Plus, Rich Hill can still help a team, and he can really choose where to go with that $3 million, right? He could go back to the Dodgers. He could go to the Giants. He's not gonna make a decision for the rest of his career, because the rest of his career is like 2 more years, right? I mean, it's the rest of his career could be this last deal. And I don't think he's gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna go to the place that gives me 4.5 versus 4. And I don't think he's gonna have an offer from one team that's like 8 million or the Mets 3 million. I think they're all gonna come in around the same. That's what they do. And so, you end up, Rich Hill will be looking at 3 or 4 deals that separate by like $1 million at tops. And he'll be like, you know what? Might be fun to be in New York. This looks like a fun team they're putting together. So I'm going to go and be probably worth more than my 3 million, but that's the only offer anyone's giving me. And boom, now you've got a really old rotation, but when they're all healthy, they're good. And you've pushed Tyler Megill, who's, I think, somewhat exciting. And David Peterson is useful. Now they're your 6 and 7, And I think that's the kind of thing that they'll do when baseball comes back online. They'll try and grab, either a reliever or starter that is like just excited to come to New York, basically.
Yeah, I like the idea of those guys being not in your projected 5 to begin the year, but you're going to need them at some point, right? You think back to Dodgers teams of recent years, and Ross Stripling for a long time was that sort of guy. It's great to have those swing options who are good enough starters when you need them, and they're useful multi-inning relievers when you don't. I think that's a great spot to be in if you are the Mets. You had the segue kind of snuck in there.
I did. Texas, baby.
Marcus Semien to the Rangers. This was the number one thing on the rundown until the Scherzer thing broke about 4 minutes before we started recording. So the Rangers could have let off the show. And you and Britt and I spent, I think, $100 million in about 4.5 minutes. One of our last
they're going to do it too.
They're going to do it. And we kind of had a good sense of like, well, where are they going to spend? Marcus Semien gets 7 and 175. I've seen the Rangers linked to Corey Seager. I'd be a little surprised if they got both. It's not impossible. Like, they certainly have the money. They built a new stadium. Payroll was low. More power to them if they want to go out and get both.
It is my understanding from talking to people around the game that there is another big one coming, and it wasn't just Gray and it wasn't just Semien. So
nice. Well, 7 for 175 for Marcus Semien. Like, kudos to him for having to bet on himself and coming through with another massive year, showing us that 2019 was not, in fact, the career year with what he did with the Blue Jays. Thinking about this from a fantasy perspective for a moment, we're thinking about the park factors with Citi Field and the guys going there. This is one where I do have a little bit of concern, but we still don't have enough data. At least I don't think we have enough data to look at the new stadium in Arlington and say, this is definitely how it plays, but it is playing pretty similar to how Rogers Center has played. At least it did in 2021, because Rogers Center has played more neutral than people realize.
Because they just have a really good offensive team. We did see Vlad Guerrero have pretty strong splits between Buffalo and Florida, Dunedin and Rogers Center. I did see that.
Yeah, and it's complicated by how much they moved around this year and all that. But the point here is that the concerns I would have about Marcus Semien are more related to the supporting cast as they build out that lineup around him. It's almost certainly, even if the Rangers add another big free agent bat to go with him, almost certainly going to be a less powerful lineup around him in Texas than the one that he spent around him in 2021 with the Jays. So that's the counting stats might not be quite as gaudy. I think the questions come down to,
and the power might be more like Oakland, but we'll see.
Yeah, is it 30 home run power, and is it still 10 to 15 steals? Like, where do we fall on power and speed projections for Semien going to his new team?
Yeah, that's funny that you point that out. In my mind, Texas is a pitcher's park and Rogers is a hitter's park. So that's just a sort of blink assessment, right? I totally believe you that it plays closer. So, the Steamer projection is 260, 30 homers, 11 steals. Um, I'd like to buy him at less than that. You know what I'm saying? Like if it's fantasy and I'm like in an auction and Marcus Semien's up, I'd like to buy Marcus Semien at like 260, 25, and 10.
Okay.
And then hope that he plays more to it. The other thing that, that factored into this is he's been an Iron Man, and I think he's led the league in WAR since 2019, but he's also pretty close to leading the league in plate appearances. And in fact, I think he does. So you can read that a couple different ways, right? I mean, I think the way that the Rangers read that is he's an Iron Man. He's dedicated to being out there. He takes care of himself, and this and that, the other. But we've also said on this show, a lot of times you look at a guy and it's like 600, 600, 600, 200. It just comes out of nowhere. And time comes for everyone. And it's like maybe that research that's out there that on Baseball Prospectus about how every pitch is bad for you in terms of like pitchers like just getting worse over the course of the season because of fatigue. Maybe it's the same for hitters where like every plate appearance is bad for you in terms of the long-term ramifications. So that part would make me a little nervous. The thing that I love about Marcus Semien is that, when I talk about people being good clubhouse guys, to me, that means that they hang out with everyone. They kind of build bridges between different groups, because a lot of clubhouses can be stratified along racial lines or, background, college, high school, that sort of deal. And Semien, as I've seen him, has been a guy that makes it his point to kind of talk to everybody in the clubhouse and have a relationship with everyone in the clubhouse, being one of the highest or one of the highest paid position players in the clubhouse will give him gravitas, and I think will make it easier for him to transition to a new team. And I think he will be a leader on that team. And if you just do the math, it says that in his last year, which everyone's so concerned about, the 7th year, in his last year, he'll be a 1.5 win, like DH type, half in the field, half not, maybe Cano-ish, near, where he's still a good hitter, but he's hurt, or he plays DH some days. And it says they're paid $8 million per win. So I don't know. It seems kind of ridiculous because of his age and 7 years, but the numbers say it was a fine deal.
What's interesting to me is I know there were some reports about the Rangers prospects in the fall league being among the more impressive groups of players. And I think with the lost minor league season in 2020, there is a possibility that a bunch of guys that would have popped a year ago didn't necessarily pop that much this year, and seeing them in a setting like the fall league could be a way of opening our eyes to
who are we talking about here? Because I know Owen White was their guy, and he won the best pitcher of the year. But that's the normal sized man is a giant in the land of, yeah, you get it.
Continue.
I don't know. I watched White, and I wouldn't say that I'm telling everybody to go at him. Maybe he can be a good depth piece for them, but he didn't pop in my eyes. So what were some other names from the fall league that was on the hitting side for the Rangers?
Justin Foscue and Ezekiel Duran, I think, were the other two that kind of stood out to a few different people out there. So
Foscue's an outfielder, right?
I think they drafted him as an infielder. They might be playing him in the outfield. He's been hurt a little bit too during the minor league season, so I think that was a big deal. So like, just to get those extra reps.
Ezekiel Duran, 22, listed as a second baseman, 50 future value on Fangraphs, with good raw power and issues with hit tool. Yeah, he's got high strikeout rates, but good batting averages, decent power, good speed, and has been playing third base and second base. Oh, well, he's blocked now.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. So, I mean, you've got these guys that are probably going to move off the infield to the outfield because they don't have a lot of outfield prospects knocking on the door, and they don't have a lot of outfielders locked in at the big league level. So that's a fine.
He has some speed. Maybe they can try Duran in center. They're looking for something in center. and center is a hard place to sign a free agent.
Yeah, I think Leote gets a shot in 2022 because he had a good enough year at AAA to see how he fares, but certainly no guarantees based on what's happened with him and his previous opportunities at the big league level. But then you add like Josh Young, not in the fall league, but their best prospect. He's big league ready this year,
and they're really excited. And I think they're really excited about Young, and I think he's basically the guy in pencil. So I think maybe Solak starts the year at third, but Solak and Duran and Foscue and even Adolis Garcia, I would say that they're all on the hot seat. They're all potential left fielders along with Willie Calhoun. It's a group that may only produce one or two starters for the Rangers, and it's a group that people are really excited about. But you have to be honest and look at this depth chart and realize, Solak, Kiner Falefa, Calhoun, Adolis Garcia, all those guys, and then their top prospects, they're going to produce one or two starters.
Yeah, Yanni Hernandez.
I think they're going to add. Yeah, right. And we were excited about Yanni Hernandez and to some extent Pozo. But what are you going to do? I think that they'll just be guys that come up when guys are injured for the short term, and then guys who have. I wouldn't be surprised if Billy McKinney didn't make the opening day roster, and right now he's the Fangraphs starter in left field.
It makes sense because McKinney has bounced around and he's been targeted and picked up and claimed by mostly good organizations more recently. So there's something there, especially like barrel rate, and I've seen him play enough to understand like why teams are interested.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he'll be anything more than a on the roster, off the roster sort of player, but you take the shot on a guy like that if you're in their position. You have 200 plate appearances in the first half of the season that are up for grabs. And I think that fairly describes what the Rangers are looking at. But you have Young, you have Jack Leiter and Cole Winn on the pitching side. I think I took Cole Winn in that draft and hold day I was in a few weeks ago in the 46th round, 47th round, because if you start looking at the rotation, right, you add John Gray, they probably are going to add one more starter. Taylor Hearn, Dayton Dunning, AJ Alexy, Spencer Howard. Out of Hearn, Dunning, Alexy, and Howard, I think like two of those guys stick in the rotation. I think it's probably Dunning and Howard that get the longest looks there. I could see Hearn and Alexy being up and down or even bullpen guys.
I think they're going to sign another starter. Yeah, I think you don't. More. I think you want Alexy, Otto, Allard. I think you want all those guys out of your rotation as your 6 and 7 guys.
Those are depth guys for sure. But I think Leiter and Winn might be in this rotation by midsummer,
especially if they go with like either Rich Hillian, like either like an older guy just to fill innings, or if they take a shot at someone like Carlos Rodon, right, and throw him in that rotation, then who better to stand in for an injured Carlos Rodon than Jack Leiter? You know what I mean? Like if your team is going well. If not, then you call up Glenn Otto again.
Yeah. So you have a few depth guys that can be the glue guys until your younger pitchers are ready, but they're getting close. I
mean, kudos to them. Like just a couple signings, you start to look at this team differently. You know what I mean? Just pushing down all those guys by putting Gray at the top and pushing Solak from he's definitely into if he pops, we'll use him. If not, he can be utility. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that changes a lot of the way you look at this team. Now you can kind of imagine, especially if they have one or two more big signings in them, you can kind of imagine like a pathway to making it work, where you're like, well, the relief squad isn't amazing, but it does have Jonathan Hernandez and Jonathan Leclerc in it, right? And those guys were really, really good when they were healthy. So, depending on when they get healthy, if they push some of those guys like Patton and Spores down a couple rungs, then all of a sudden even the bullpen could be good.
Is this a good signing? John Gray, 4 for 56. I mean, I think either on this show or maybe it was on the athletic baseball show, I had this thought that maybe John Gray is a lot like Lance Lynn was a few years ago, and then he just had to deal with Colorado his entire career. Because when Lance Lynn went to Texas a few years ago as a free agent, no one was that excited about that. It was just like, oh, it's just innings. Yeah, this is a rebuilding team. Got to get innings somewhere. How good is John Gray going to be? I mean, how much has he lost since he entered the league, and how excited should we be about him from a fantasy perspective, getting a chance to be in at least a neutral environment, if not a slightly pitcher-friendly one?
Well, the stuff numbers are going to be worse for him because Coors actually changes your stuff numbers. It actually changes the shape of your pitches. But a 96 stuff plus is interesting because he has the type of fastball that doesn't get changed by Coors. That's why he was an effective Coors pitcher, I think, because he has this weird four-seam fastball that doesn't really have great ride or great sink, but is kind of in between. And if you actually look at it, I wrote a piece about this. Like the Coors pitchers that have done well all have the same fastball. They have the John Gray fastball. Marquez, Senzatella, all those guys have the same fastball. And the problem for me is I think that the biggest upside for him, so his curveball did get affected. And so I think his curveball is going to be average. So now you're going to talk about a guy who has like 110, 115 stuff plus slider, right? A really good slider. Then he's going to have like 100 curveball, right? Because it's been like 90, 95, but that's because at home it's like an 85 and on the road it's like 100 and 105. So I'm going to give him 100. I'm going to give him an average curveball, a really good slider. I don't think this fastball actually has that much potential in it because it's been, and I think that changing someone's fastball is one of the hardest things to do because what are you going to do? Change a guy's arm slot at this age? No, you're not going to do that. So the only thing I could see is like maybe he comes and like it's a sinker now, or it's a totally different pitch now. So there's a possibility there that the fastball could change, but I think it won't. So I think he's basically an average pitcher, right? So 456 for an average pitcher, it's okay. But the 4, right?
Yeah. Well, the problem I have looking at what he was doing this year, look at his location for his four-seamer. You just can't throw your four-seamer. It's a fried egg with the yolk in the middle of the strike zone. Like that looks like a non-location strategy.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Is that him getting back into counts? Is that all, because it's a poor count and he's trying to get back in?
That's possible, right? If falling behind, missing with breaking stuff. And I think, your point about the secondaries too, how much more can he trust his curveball and or his changeup if he has better command of those pitches? He's basically been a two-pitch guy who has 4 pitches, but how much of that was actually the result of Colorado preventing him from getting to those options more consistently?
Yeah. I just, when you get a hitter out of Colorado, a lot of times they seem undervalued. And we've talked about how there's the Coors effect, away from home and all that deal. And so I see it when you're getting a former Coors hitter, but I don't think we've had the same effect where you get a pitcher who was in Colorado and he's immediately great when you take him out.
Yeah, part of that is their inability to have and find good pitching in the first place. Like I know there's a chicken and egg thing. Like, the pitcher's not good because the park, or are they? I actually argue that some of the issues are that they don't have very good pitchers most of the time. I mean,
and also Gray is better than Chatwood, right? Like Chatwood's the biggest recent example, but Chatwood had really poor command always. Gray doesn't have that problem.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Lance Lynn before he went to Texas, had the miserable ratios year split between the Twins and the Yankees in 2018. That first year in Texas, a 3.67 ERA and a 1.22 WHIP. That felt like, hey, he bounced back to his St. Louis levels. This is as good as it gets. And then he unlocked something and got to the 2020 and 2021 version of Lynn.
More four-seamers for sure.
Do you think Gray could be a high 3s ERA guy with a 120s whip like Lynn was in 2019? Is that a fair sort of upside comparison?
Yeah.
I don't want to expect more than that.
But one of the things that Lynn showed was a pop in velo, right?
Yeah, picked up some velo.
Gray was up off of 2020. He was at 94.9, but peak Gray 2019 was 96 average. So I don't know. Yeah, I think just getting him out, the Steamer projection, I think it's been updated. Actually still has a 4.30 ERA for him. because the home run rate is high for Gray, and home runs aren't necessarily augmented by Coors.
Yeah, they don't get spiked as much as you think they would.
Yeah.
Even though offense goes through the roof.
But I suppose the idea is we paid for, it's a sort of what we say you should do in fantasy, which is like the idea is we paid the price for an average starting pitcher. I guess that's true these days, right? 15 million a year.
Yeah.
So
Pitching market's been pretty hot.
We paid the price for an average starting pitcher, and we gave the extra year because of the upside. So we think there's a little bit more here than average, and that's why we paid a little bit extra.
It's an intriguing bet for sure, just because there's so many years of disappointment, but expectations were really high. I think people thought that John Gray was going to be the best pitcher the Rockies ever drafted when they got him, and maybe he actually is. Like it's possible. Like I'd have to look a little more closely, but it's not a rich enough history to think that it's a ridiculous
probably
claim.
Marquez.
Well, yeah, and they traded for him, so
where did they get Marquez?
Rays? I think the Rays might have got him from someone too. He might have been twice traded. I got to look into that. That I'm not sure about. You mentioned it earlier. Cole Calhoun also going to the Rangers. So yeah, Cole and Willie Calhoun now finally in the same lineup. Both Calhouns together. Let's talk about the Blue Jays for a minute. They signed Kevin Gausman to a 5-year, $110 million contract. So big deal for Gausman. Again, the pitching market has been hot. This comes after they extended Jose Barrios. They extended Barrios for 7 years at $131 million. Barrios, I believe, was set to become a free agent after 2022, so he had 1 year left.
I love that deal. I think especially in light of the John Gray deal, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make the Barrios deal seem awesome?
Yes, it does.
Like you paid $5 million more a year. You paid more years, but you got a much better pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, in Barrios, I think he's long been a favorite of me. He's a few years younger than Gray, so that factors in. But I just think it's more finesse in that arsenal. It's not just overpowering stuff when he's good. It's a good mix of pitches. I think there's still room for some growth. We'd like to see a fourth pitch or even a more consistent use of the changeup just to get to the 3 more often. But I actually like that extension quite a bit. I was surprised they went out and got Gausman. Maybe I just didn't have a good feel for what the Blue Jays were going to do with money. They're one of those teams that always has money to spend and doesn't necessarily go out and spend it. What do you think about Gausman on a deal like this for them, especially, and bringing him back into the AL East, where I realize he's not necessarily the exact same pitcher now that he was a few years ago in Baltimore, but this actually gave me some concerns in terms of fit. I don't know how I feel about this pitcher on this team in that division.
So I got the Savant park factors up, and I think the reason why became very clear to me why I have a different idea of Rogers Center than maybe the truth. It has a 98 overall park factor, and it's in the blue for everything except for one thing, which I think you can guess.
Homers.
Yeah. So, it suppresses doubles, it suppresses hits, but it augments homers by 15%. Giants still depress homers by 25%. So I think that's relevant for Gausman. He's going closer back towards, when he being in Camden. I mean, what's Camden?
127 for homers. I mean, that's that's another level up. And then of course for runs overall, it's the 4th most hitter friendly park in baseball.
But he's got to pitch there too. Yeah. I don't know. And the other thing that is interesting is they don't seem to be afraid of 2-pitch guys. I mean, they went and got Ray. They might still be in on Ray. And they went and got Gausman. And Barrios is, like a 2.5 guy. I mean, he has that changeup, but he uses mostly the curveball. And I think it's fine. 2-pitch guys in today's environment have been getting the strikeouts, and they're not as required to go as deep into games as they used to, maybe. So that's a benefit of having more pitches. They took the bet with Hyun-Jin Ryu on many pitches, and it's been fine. But maybe they think aces are made by plus pitches, elite pitches, single pitches like Gausman splitter and Ray's slider and so on.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't expect them to be in on Gausman specifically. That one just caught me off guard. It's probably in the wake of the Barrios extension. I thought, they're probably pretty comfortable with their pitching, but at the same time, they've got a lot of cost-controlled hitters for a little while. Take advantage of that while you can. Spend up on the pitching now. Cover over those flaws and make a run at it. I like it from the standpoint of they're being aggressive and they're definitely better with Gausman than they are without him. There's no argument there. I'm not trying to say he's not good, because now you're Gausman, Barrios, Ryu, Manoah, and you could probably get that extra depth guy. Yeah, whether that's
I think they probably have one more older guy in them.
I think they probably do. It would make sense to then bump Stripling into his more customary 6-starter role, maybe one more reliever too. They added Yimi Garcia.
Yeah, the Yimi Garcia signing was good for me. Romano, by the way, Pitching Plus beats projections for relievers. So mostly I've been doing in my early drafts, just drafting by Pitching Plus and roll. And Romano has been popping in my drafts as undervalued. In that I'm already in. I've already done 2 drafts. I'm an addict. But Yimi, I think, is a really good signing as I think insurance. Basically, I don't think he's the closer. I think Romano's still the closer. I think Yimi's probably the setup guy, and Merriweather is the guy they go to if both those guys crap out. So but I think those 3 are very exciting, especially when you throw in Simber and possibly Borucki or Richards as like the funk. So you've got both the funk and the power.
What I'm really curious to see too with the Blue Jays, and we'll spend more time talking about this on a future episode, is losing Marcus Semien. Do they rely on Kevin Biggio to be their primary second baseman? Do they go into free agency and find someone else to fill that void? How much can they look at their offense and say, we barely had George Springer in the regular season in 2021, so we're going to get that production back from a guy in the outfield, and we're okay with going a little cheaper at second base because we're gonna be fine offensively. I could see them making that argument, especially pushing these resources into the rotation and the bullpen the way they have so far.
You know what might be a really fun deal for them is Kyle Seager on a short-term deal. I mean, they're looking for a third baseman or a second baseman, right? I mean, the big deal would be Chris Bryant, but maybe they don't want to spend like that. A real cheap deal would be, just papering over the position with Matt Duffy or Travis Shaw, or, they did Jake Lamb to try that again. But I think Kyle Seager wouldn't cost much and would be an actual real starter at third for them. So I think it's a decent name for them.
Yeah, I think it's maybe like on the backup list at least, is what do you do if you either can't trade for someone you like or if you miss out on a more pricey option that you want to have instead. But you're right, they do have that option to go
or sign
second
like
or third.
They have Mark Shapiro there. They could sign Cesar Hernandez. Well, Cesar Hernandez is a Phillies guy.
Yeah, he didn't overlap Shapiro.
Yeah, that's right. But Cesar Hernandez but I'm looking at the free agents, and this flurry that we've gone through has really cleaned it up. There's all that's left are the guys who are going to get like minor league deals, and I mean, other than Correa, Story, Seager, and Baez, I think you're looking at, well, do we sign Freddie Galvis to be our third baseman for a year, or Kyle Seager? I don't see them being in on Correa, Story, Seager, Baez.
No, I don't think they're going to that level. Baez, to me, it just depends on what the market is for him. I could see that maybe being the surprise sort of move, right? You get a great defender. You get a guy that on an offense, I've said this about Houston before too. I think Baez fits on teams that are kind of loaded offensively, that get on base and don't strike out a lot, because you can't, if you put him on a team like the Yankees, or a team that has like a 23, 24, 25% team K rate, you're taking your problem and you're making it worse.
Yeah.
I think you can absorb that better if you've got other.
And also, if lineup diversity is a thing, it's interesting to have a very disciplined lineup and then be like, and also we have Javi Baez.
Gotta get this guy out in the bottom third of the lineup. Don't make a mistake.
Yeah, don't make a single mistake down there. Yeah, I could see it if the market. I think the Baez and Bryant, like I think I could see the Blue Jays watching the Baez and Bryant markets and being like, if that's softer than people expect, we could jump in there and get ourselves a deal. And then Seager to me is a great sort of. I keep saying Rich Hill's name, but he's like the Rich Hill of offense kind of signing. Let's give Kyle Seager 1 year and 10 million, or let's give Rich Hill 1 year and 10 million to be our third baseman.
All right, that's too
enough,
far.
Be quiet.
Yeah, that's enough of that. Let's keep it moving. Let's go to Houston, where Justin Verlander has returned 1 year, $25 million plus a player option for 2023. So I think it comes out to like 2 for $50 if we just assume that he'll pick that up. If it's better for him to do that, or if he thinks the market next winter is the better option, he can go test that out too. I think it's interesting because Verlander gets 1 for 25 with that option. Noah Syndergaard got 1 for 21 from the Angels. If you're taking your pick between those two, and I realize like Verlander's at a point in his career, especially where the list of teams he wanted to pitch for is probably a lot shorter. Syndergaard might still be in the clearly I want the best offer, best situation to come back from TJ. Who do you like better in these circumstances coming off of the same injury?
I think I know Verlander's older, but I think I take Verlander because his health track record was better before the TJ. The one thing about Noah that was weird was he always was grabbing a hamstring and all those other things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Verlander was pretty healthy before the TJ. So I know he had an oblique. I'm going to take Verlander, and I think for the Astros, it's an amazing fit because having Verlander last year or McCullers would have been the difference in that World Series. I think.
Yeah, and I think we sometimes forget when a pitcher loses a year like this, just how good they were before surgery. Verlander was elite of the elite. Like if he had stayed healthy, he'd be getting a deal probably comparable to Scherzer. That is absolutely the type of contract he could get. And if he comes back and has a year similar to Scherzer, he won't exercise that option and he'll get 2 for 80 or something next winter if that's what he wants, right? So he could still get there pretty easily. It's interesting that he goes back to Houston, but I think it makes all the sense in the world. It gives them a lot of stability. They have the same kind of uncertainty around Lance McCullers and his health that the Mets have with DeGrom. Not to say that McCullers' value is anywhere close to DeGrom's, but now you feel a lot better about what you have coming back with Verlander, and high trust level too. Had the surgery early enough to be further removed from it when spring training removes than a lot of guys will be. So I think that also gives me that little extra bit of confidence that he's going to come back and be most of the guy that he was pre-surgery in 2022.
Yeah, but I'm looking at this Astros team and they have a Carlos Correa-sized hole in it. I mean, they need some offense somewhere, right? This team right now, it looks a little, it just lost its luster because they moved on from George Springer in center, and so Myers looked okay, but he also he hurt his rotator cuff. He had surgery on that. So you're gonna open up the season with Chas McCormick in center and Jeremy Pena at short, and Yuli Gurriel at first, and Martin Maldonado at catcher. Like that, those are legitimate hole. Like those are holes, right? Gurriel's close to not being a hole, but he's like average at best, right? So then that start to look like a kind of a bad offense. I think they need to sign one of the big shortstops. And maybe it's not going to be Correa if they don't want to go to like 340 or whatever, but I think they need to sign one of those shortstops.
Yeah, that's where my previous thoughts about Baez fitting in really well come from. I think he'd be an option for them if they didn't want to go to the top of the free agent list at shortstop. But I mean, Jordan's a legitimately elite hitter. Kyle Tucker has risen to that
really
level.
Good.
Bregman's been there before. Altuve bounced back. I think Bregman, how much of his struggles this season were the result of the wrist injury that he had surgery for, right? I mean, what does he bounce back to? That's a huge question for us, fantasy-wise, but also just for the Astros, because if he's pre-2020 Bregman, that's a massive lift. That's a guy they haven't really had at that level in a while. So if you get him back, that changes a lot about how this lineup looks. But I agree with you. I think they're one
and can
good
you play
regular bat
Bregman
short
at short still? Could you spend the money at third and get like Bryant?
That's an interesting thought. I don't know if I would want to go down that path with Bregman at this stage. I mean, he's only 27. He turns 28 in March, so you could maybe do it for a year or two. But how long do you want to stick with that plan?
To me, I hate to get tied up over years and stuff like that, and I haven't been. I think in my analysis of these other deals, but to me, the bias matters so much on years because he has really poor plate discipline, and at one point that it's gonna fall apart on him because he just won't make contact on anything outside of the zone. He'll swing at too many things outside of the zone, and I think it's a very complicated swing. I just. Maybe they'll surprise us and get Story, where it's not the top of the market, but it's not the it's not the worst of the big shortstops.
I actually like that fit quite a bit too. I mean, I know there's some swing and miss concerns with Story.
It's not quite the same level as Baez.
Not quite, and I think he'll age reasonably well. But if you think about if Semien got 7 for 175, is Story getting that many years or that much money coming off the year he just had?
And how much are they worried about the declining arm strength in Story, which is definitely a thing.
Right, because moving him to second base, get Altuve for a while yet, that's not necessarily a great option. Maybe you could throw him in left field eventually. That would be an option too. But yeah, I could see Story maybe being the higher end of what they would do if they don't keep Correa. I don't think they're keeping Correa, though. I think Correa's gone. I get the sense he's Detroit, New York, somewhere.
This team does seem built up where, like, maybe they could have one really expensive player. Like, who is their one really expensive player otherwise? Verlander.
Yeah, on an AAV level, it's Verlander, but otherwise they don't really have.
Right. I don't see a really expensive team. Maybe this was all set up so that Correa was the one we keep. I mean, Bregman and Altuve did sign extensions, but those weren't like, the type of extension that Carlos Correa wants.
Yeah. Hector Neris added to the bullpen, 2 for 17 for Neris. Kendall Graveman going to the White Sox. So basically swapping out Graveman, swapping in Neris. Nice for Neris to get out of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And he has a 105 stuff plus. Presley has a 122 stuff plus. So I think Presley is not really feeling the heat from Neris. But Neris and Stanek and Maton, I think that's a fine bullpen. I'm into that bullpen, but I do think Presley's the easy closer there.
Let's get to the Angels for a moment. I mentioned Syndergaard kind of as a comparison for Verlander. 1 for 21. Angels give up a draft pick for 1 year of Syndergaard, since he, of course, got that qualifying offer from the Mets. They added Aaron Loop, 2 for 17 for him to the bullpen.
Best stuff plus among free agent relievers.
I would not have guessed that. You could have given me 10 guesses, and I would not have guessed Aaron Loop. So a much-needed addition to the bullpen. We'll see what they do with Raisel Iglesias and how that plays out. But, okay, so the Angels are at least trying to fix their flaws. They added Michael Lorenzen for a 1-year, $7 million deal. I saw the tweet from Robert Murray that they are trying him as a starter. I mean, we'll see if that actually sticks. I think he's made 5 starts in the last 6 years combined.
Well, that's how Lorenzen was marketing himself. Yeah.
Yeah. So if it doesn't work, then of course he goes to the bullpen and you got one more arm in the late innings. But what do you make of what they've done so far? Is this sort of shopping in the bargain bin?
They get an incomplete. I mean, I love Noah Syndergaard. Otani Syndergaard is an awesome one too, I think, in the rotation. That changes a lot. I don't think they've had as good a number 2 or as a good 2 pitchers atop their rotation in this whole time. So, I think that's a good move by them. But there's so much incomplete left. I mean, is Tyler Wade their starting shortstop or David Fletcher? And if David Fletcher's their starting shortstop, who's their starting second baseman? And right now, I think in the outfield, it's Trout, Marsh, Adele, which is something we've been asking for a while, but it's also very high variance. They've still got Upton, so I guess that's a Fangraphs thing. I think if you have Upton, you're actually Upton, Trout, Marsh, Adele.
Well,
something like that.
In some capacity, yeah.
But it's 4 good outfielders, but there's also a real collapse percentage there where 2 of them aren't major leaguers.
I'd take my chances on that group, though. I mean, you could.
So you think that's complete? So the outfield is complete, and the next move they make is a shortstop?
It's got to be a middle infielder. I mean,
Yeah.
because you're going to play Fletcher most likely at one of those spots. Healthy Rendon, of course, comes back. So you got Rendon and Walsh on the corners. Rengifo's your
Here's a
utility
good
guy.
spot for Story too, because if you sign him as a shortstop and then you think the arm strength is a problem, you can move him over to second.
Yeah, they have that flexibility a bit more. I think that does make sense. I think he'd be among the players that they should definitely consider. I think that's their clearest need from a position player perspective. I think Max Stassi's a little underrated, so I like that he's kind of got catcher to himself, health permitting. I actually like the outfield a little more than you do because I think we saw Adele lower the K rate last year.
Marsh looked really good for a bit.
And Marsh was coming off shoulder surgery, so I think having a normal offseason for him, a healthier offseason, he could enter 2022 and take a pretty big step forward this year. So really it comes down to
They need
what
a
are you
reliever
doing?
though too.
Well, they need
They need a reliever, a middle infielder. Yeah, they need a reliever, a middle infielder, and they need what everyone else needs, which is kind of annoying. That depth starting pitcher, Rich Hill. Anyway, I'm banging the drum for Rich Hill. I definitely am. I also think Alex Cobb. The Giants were in on him. Alex Cobb is here, but the reason I just want to take a little bit of segue here. We've said this now about every team that we've talked about, right? That they could use a depth starter. That's why the Rich Hill thing became a joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
The list is running out. Max Scherzer is gone. Clayton Kershaw, I think, yeah, maybe sign him. I think it's all about what you see in the medicals. I think that he'll be a late sign because people will want to see him throwing again, right? So I don't think Clayton Kershaw is like something that you see in the next couple of days. Then there's Rich Hill, Kevin Gausman signed, Marcus Stroman. That's not like a depth signing. That's a big money. Corey Kluber signed, Andrew Haney signed. I'm going down Stuff Plus, by the way. So Max Scherzer's number one free agent Stuff Plus. He just signed. Clayton Kershaw, I think, is a big question mark. Rich Hill is third. Kevin Gausman signed. Marcus Stroman's a big deal. Corey Kluber signed. Andrew Haney signed. Anthony DeSclafani signed. Now we're getting into the place where it's league average stuff or worse. And these guys are available, but how excited are you about the following crew? Because this is what we're talking about for the Angels and the Mets and everybody. Drew Smyly, Danny Duffy, Chris Archer, Alex Cobb, Cole Stewart, Michael Wacha signed, Alex Wood signed, Mike Foltynewicz, Willie Peralta, Brad Peacock, John Gray signed, Corey Oswald, Tyler Anderson. He's going to get a 2-year deal because of what I'm telling you right now. You know what I mean? Like, he's not even going to be a 1-year depth deal. Zach Greinke to the Angels might be fun.
Yeah. Well, I think Stroman actually makes sense. They have money, plenty of money to spend. They had a lot of money come off the books. Yeah. I mean, look at what Pujols, among other things, off the books. And even when you factor in some of the raises and some guys getting a little more expensive, like Rendon's free agent deal that he signed, it jumps up $8 million from 2021 to 2022. But there's a $70 million difference based on what Tots
final. Yeah, estimated 2021 payroll final was 182. Estimated right now is 163. And they could probably go right up to 200, I think.
Yeah, and they don't have a bunch of arbitration raise guys in there either, so they can spend they could get Stroman, and I think Stroman fits really well. If you have the injury risk of Syndergaard, and I would still say Ohtani carries above average injury risk, not only as a two-way player, but because he just had Tommy John a couple of years ago. You need that sort of stabilizing presence. I think Stroman fits exceptionally well for them, just based on who their 1 and 2 are right now.
All right, so we're building the Angels, and we're going to sign Marcus Stroman. We're going to sign Raisel Iglesias, and we're going to sign Trevor Story.
Yep, and Tyler Anderson.
That's going to cost us 15, 10, 25, 35, and then Story. That's going to cost us $60 million, dude.
We just spent the money that they were spending last year.
Really?
60 million plus the raises that are on the sheet right now. Yeah, it's about the same. They run top 5 payrolls and they're competitive. Well, they run top 5 payrolls sometimes when they're not competitive too.
Well, by roster resource, if we added 60 million, they would be at 220.
I'm
I
looking at
mean,
Cots. They'd have them at 171. Maybe the arbitration numbers aren't tacked on for
actually,
2022
the
yet.
estimated luxury tax number is 172 right now. So if you give them 260, they'd go to 230. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I think they'll spend like 30 or 40 million, which means in this case, we have to choose between a middle infielder and a starter.
I think you need the middle infielder a little bit more at this point.
Yeah, you do. That outfield, that offense, I think really needs it. So the more budget plan is Story, Rich Hill. The reliever stuff plus market goes Aaron Loop, Raisel Iglesias, Jimmy Nelson, Colin McHugh. It's not very good. Daniel Hudson.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, because you could
Daniel
have him close.
Hudson.
I think Hudson would be a guy they would go get if they don't bring back Iglesias.
Yeah. So I'm doing the budget version. So the budget version is like Hudson or Knievel, maybe.
Okay.
Like basically try to sign a guy that you think can close, but not at closer prices. So if we did Story, Hudson, and Hill, we would be spending about 30 to 35 million. And that would get them right below the luxury tax.
Well, that might be very important to them right now, but they have to make more moves. Incomplete is an absolute fair grade right now. The Angels. There's just still a bunch of holes that need to be filled there. Some other signings. We're going to try and run through a lot of these a little faster than the first cluster that we did.
Eno, shut up.
No, I'm not. That wasn't code. That was just saying these are less interesting by comparison. Erod goes to the Tigers, 5 for 77. So okay,
sure.
It's an incomplete for the Tigers because we know they're players for one of the shortstops, most likely Carlos Correa. It would make a lot of sense to start adding. They got young pitching there already. You tack Erod into the Mize, Skubal, Manning trio. Eventually you get Turnbull back. Okay, like I can start to get a little excited about them, and of course they've got supposedly a lot of young players.
Non-tender Matt Boyd is the newest news.
That's the word. Well, they've got Riley Green knocking on the door. They got Spencer Torkelson knocking on the door.
Riley Green strikes out a little bit too much for my liking, but he otherwise is a very exciting young bat.
Yeah, so you got 3 prospects.
Torque is ready, and I thought he in the Arizona Fall League. I bet you that he's the opening day first baseman.
It's a pretty nice lift to start putting a few of those guys into the mix. So they're going to get better with that group position players. Erod, I thought, was really good even before what he did in the postseason. So I think he makes sense for them. Getting out of Boston as a lefty, especially, that might actually be a little bit of an upgrade for him park-wise. So maybe he's a little more stable for us for the next couple of years. I think that's a good thing too.
Rodriguez, 5 year 77, or Gray, 4 year 56.
I would have taken Rodriguez,
I think. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think there's as much upside to unlock. You know what I mean? Like, he's not a great stuff guy, but I also think that he was probably the unluckiest of his career last year. Mm-hmm. So why not buy a guy who's like basically a true talent, 4.0 ERA guy?
I think that's fair, but I would say whatever he's lost in terms of run support and good team context that way, I think he at least made it back, if not more, by going to a more pitcher-friendly environment. I think this is
it's a nice projection. 3.82 ERA, 1.25 WHIP is it's a really good, I would say number 2 in AL only, and then probably for 15-team mixed leagues is more like a number 4.
Yep. A 4 if you've got a strong rotation, maybe a 3 if you wait a little bit on pitching would be the way I would.
And probably useful for teams that bet on like a sale at the top, because I do think Rodriguez has had some injury issues, but it's mostly not been in the arm.
Mm-hmm.
So I like it. I like him for innings this year.
Yeah, a lot of knee issues going in the 140s in the last couple of NFBC drafts, 140 overall range. So 15 teamers, it's about the 10th round or so if you're looking for him. You mentioned Steven Matz earlier, 4 for 44. The thing that works for me, though, with Matz is that it's an extremely pitcher-friendly environment. St. Louis is a great place to pitch. Yeah. Got a great defense behind him. So
I know I know someone's going to unearth some tweet or something where I was negative about Matz, and he's going to have great numbers in St. Louis. But my point is just like, I think you could buy so many different pitchers on the free agent market, and they have great numbers in St. Louis. And in fact, I think one of the things that St. Louis has not figured out that the Giants have figured out is that you should just always just get whoever falls in the pitching market.
Yeah.
And
yeah, four for 44. I mean, it's fine. Like it could be fine. I'm on your side of this one where I don't
it'll
like
look good. He'll be a fine in fantasy. I just don't. Yeah, I don't think he's a very good pitcher. I just think he's better than like the Dakota Hudsons of the world. And they should make deals like this. But I don't think they, 4 for 44 strikes me as the high end of the filler market, right?
Right. Well, it comes back to the John Gray question. Would you have just paid a little extra to get John Gray? Yes, I would have said.
I would have paid. Yes, that's what I don't like.
I would have gone 4 for 60 on John Gray
or less
the Rangers
for somebody else, right? Like It's just I don't like where it is. I would have paid more for somebody with more upside, or I would have paid less. I would have gotten Alex Cobb for like 1-8 or 1-10 or wherever he's going to sign for, rather than lock this guy in for 4 years. So.
Yeah, look, I got Sierra on my dashboard for Fangraphs. John Gray has 4 seasons, even pitching in Colorado, with Sierra's under 4, which is surprising. The first one I think was like a partial season. Steven Matz only has 2 seasons like that. I just again another little nudge in the favor.
They both have poor fastball shapes, but Matz has been worse, and he's already done the work. That's what I don't like, is that he did the work to shape his pitches and get the most out of what he could out of his arsenal. And that was last year.
Yeah.
So it's not like I look at what he did last year. I'm like, oh, he should. No, I got nothing left for Matz. Like, yeah, he did everything that I said, he thought he could do, and he was useful. I don't, with Gray, there's a little bit more like, oh, what if the fastballs changed shape this way or that way? Or what if he added a sinker or something? Or what if he just threw the curveball and slider a ton?
So I think my issue with the Matt signing also is just what the Giants were able to do. And maybe these guys wanted to stay in San Francisco, and they got, the Giants got.
But everybody would want to sign in St. Louis too, dude. Every pitcher would love to sign in St. Louis. That's probably why he took the St. Louis over the Mets in the last minute.
Well, so Alex Wood got 2 years, and I think it's north of $10 million per year. I don't think I saw the final terms there. So he goes back to the Giants. Anthony DeSclafani gets 3 for 36 to stay with the Giants, and then Brandon Belt accepted the qualifying offer. You and I got together for a beer the Friday before Thanksgiving. We were laughing because Logan Webb on that day was the only starter on the Giants depth chart. So
yeah, I think I'd mentioned that I had picked up a share of Palumbo in a really deep draft because Palumbo by stuff looked pretty good in 2020. And then also they just had nobody else, and Palumbo was like the third starting or the second starting pitcher that day. Now Palumbo's all the way down to 5th. I assume he'll be like the 6th or 7th starter by the time the season starts.
Yeah, I think that's a fair sort of assessment. My question for you is, with both Alex Wood and Anthony DeSclafani jumping up in terms of price, they're not ridiculous, but they're just outside the top 200 in terms of their early ADPs, kind of in that 2 to 250 range, depending on who's in the room with you. Are you in on either or both of those guys in that range, considering where they pitch, what you've seen from them in San Francisco? Are they good at that price? Are they break even at that price? Where do you fall on them?
I still think it's a pretty good spot. I mean, what are some of the other pitchers around them? Because I feel like the floor for those guys is they're absolutely useful in like 70% of the weekly, because you're talking like weekly lineup situation, right? They're going to be like they're going to be in the top 10 or 20 pitchers some weeks in weekly lineups. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because they have like 2 games against like the Rockies and the Padres at home.
Yeah, you won't throw them on the road against the Dodgers. You won't throw them in Colorado.
But
otherwise,
75% of the season, they're like top 50 type pitchers.
They live right now in the Cal Quantrill, Patrick Sandoval, Jordan Montgomery.
And those guys you won't play all the time either. Except it'll be harder to figure out exactly when to play them.
Quantrill's probably close to that 75% range because of the AL Central.
Cleveland, and because he's in Cleveland. But in some ways, and he might have some more upside. Like DeSclafani and Wood are defined creatures at this point, I'm not saying that there's something to unlock and there's another level. Like, I think they are who they are. They can only go down because of fastball velo. So Quantrill has a little bit more upside. So maybe I take Quantrill over those guys, but they absolutely belong where they are, and I think they're good picks compared to most of the names you said.
And then Brandon Belt accepting that qualifying offer on the hitting side, that made all the sense in the world. I don't think free agency was going to be that kind to him. It just isn't for a guy with A, that positional limitation, and B, his injury history, especially.
Yeah.
2 for 30 wasn't going to be out there. So 1 for 18 to stay in a place where he's had a lot of success makes a lot of sense, but it also leaves the Giants in a good spot too.
I just feel badly for his legacy, man. I've seen, too many people still to this day, on Twitter discussing his low batting average, the fact that he's never hit through 30 home runs. I mean, maybe not among fantasy players or the Fangraphs types, but it's still a thing out there in the world that he's not a good hitter because his batting average is low. And I just, here's a story where WRC Plus tells a very different story. He's been 26% better than league average as a hitter over the course of his career. Yeah, and I think that tells the real story of Brandon Belt.
Yeah, Brandon Belt has been below a 100 WRC plus one time in his entire career,
and it was a 98. It was a
98. It was fine. Yeah. Like, it was a good year. Yeah, he's been a much better offensive player than anybody looking at his batting average could possibly give him credit for. Moving on to the next cluster of moves. Avisail Garcia to the Marlins. We knew they were going to do something to ramp up that offense. 4 for 53 for Avi. Good for him. I mean, looked like a totally different guy going back to 2020. Completely changed his body. I think he held a lot of that change over into 2021. Had a great season with the Brewers. Goes into a more pitcher-friendly environment, but you're talking about a max volume playing time guy who I think at least in like NL only leagues and those types of formats, like I'm definitely interested in. I'm a little less locked in mixers. I think it'll probably be more good than bad price right now in that 180 overall range. Totally fine for a guy that should play as much as he's able to do so. That's in the Conforto, Hunter Renfroe. Robbie Grossman's a really interesting player. We'll get to him on a future episode, I'm sure. Jorge Soler, Adam Duvall. Like those guys are all in that same range.
What's interesting, too, from a real baseball perspective, is that he's among a bunch of outfielders that have real-life baseball flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And the Conforto is the only one that kind of reaches my eye where I'm like, I don't know what his flaw is other than coming off of not the greatest season, But Garcia has a little bit more in common with like a Duvall than people might realize, because he doesn't strike out like Duvall, and he doesn't have the terrible OBPs, but he does not have a good plate approach, really. And defensively, he's like a StatCast god. Like he throws the ball in the top 15%. His max exit velos in the top 15%. He runs in the top 15%. His roots are probably in the bottom 10% of the league. I mean, you must have seen this. Where, do you remember even in the postseason, there were a couple times where you're like, oh, no. The ball would find him, you know what I mean? And he would do ridiculous things. And you're just like, this guy is like a 5-tool player. Somebody said on Twitter, it was really funny, the worst 5-tool player there is.
It's an interesting thing. Someone has to be the worst 5-tool player.
I'm not trying to be mean. These guys are all really good, but he is less than the sum of his parts. When you add up all the StatCasts, you're like, oh, this guy's amazing. And then you're like, oh, how did he miss that ball?
It's weird.
NLDH could really help him.
Yeah, and I think, in the end of the deal, it probably will. I think what's interesting is he's lumped together with all these guys who are like non-tender DFA, having trouble keeping their job type guys for the most part. Not Conforto. Conforto's coming off a down year and is just being underdrafted.
And he's probably better than them. I mean, he's at least locked into a job if you're talking fantasy, right?
But like, look at Hunter Renfroe, or look at what Jorge Soler cost via trade, right? I mean, think about Adolis Garcia going a little bit.
That was my point, right? Yeah, these are not good baseball players. Most of them.
But it's a volume game, and there's nothing that's going to keep him from playing every single day.
In terms of buying plate appearances, you're going to do well with Garcia next year.
That's where
probably the first time in his career to go past 601.
I mean, I think there are opportunities for him to do it in the past. It was just a health thing. But I think with the way he's changed his body, I'm more confident in him staying healthy now than I would have been in the past, at least a little
Oh,
bit
you
more
think he was
confident.
just too big for himself?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a frame like that, I think it lends itself to creating more problems, right? Like you're putting more strain on your joints by being, I would assume, overweight for his. He's a big guy. He's huge. Like when you see him standing on the field,
Yeah.
he is a large human.
Like
We've
a
said this
linebacker.
before, but he has being more trim. I think he's much more likely to stay healthy. Could just be wish casting. I don't know, but I don't know. I have more confidence in him this way. The other thing the Marlins did.
What do you do? You know, the rumors are that they're going to trade a starting pitcher, and to me, it's Pablo Lopez, because they just signed Alcantara to an extension. Rogers is still on the minimum salary, and I don't think Eliezer Hernandez has much trade value to other teams. So, if you trade Pablo Lopez, what are you looking for? Center fielder?
Yeah, I think that's your first thing you want, because at this point, you're not expecting Lewis Brinson to be that guy.
I think Harrison. I think it's gone. So I think you would rather De La Cruz and Sanchez had one position between the two of them.
Yeah, they could platoon in a corner. That would work. I don't know.
Does it work by handedness?
Yeah, De La Cruz is a righty and Jesus Sanchez is a lefty. So
there you go. That's not a bad platoon, actually. That would be pretty good. And of course with depth, so they'd play when Garcia was hurt or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
But
or if there was
NLDH trading for as a center fielder, what team? Because Byron Buxton got an extension. He's staying in Minnesota.
But the Orioles are not going to give up Mullins for Pablo Lopez, will they?
No, they'd want like Max Meyer and something else, or like Meyer and Watson, or something like real big.
Maybe the Marlins could do that.
Would you trade Meyer and Watson to get Cedric Mullins?
Who's Watson?
Khalil Watson.
Center fielder?
Shortstop.
Shortstop.
Fell to 16 in the draft, but I mean, it was their first rounder.
I mean, I think it depends on how much of a burn they're feeling to be competitive, right? If they want to build it for long term, I doubt they do that deal. But who else is selling center fielders? Brian Reynolds. There you go.
Okay, now you're talking. Like that I think is doable.
Brian Reynolds. That would be an interesting trade. But
nice fit.
But also what's weird about giving up Pablo Lopez for Brian Reynolds is like you're just giving up a major league piece for a major league piece. I think what you would actually do is trade Pablo Lopez to a contender that wants Lopez for a near center fielder. I know it's not going to be Brandon Marsh, but like that.
Yeah, I guess that would be, Atlanta probably fits that description because they have extra outfielders now.
I suppose maybe on Marsh, right? Like it could be.
Actually, maybe if you believe Justin Upton can still do something, and you think Mike Trout's going to stay healthy, and you want Adele to have a spot to himself, and you can get a veteran outfielder. And you think that
Adele can play center if you need to.
Yeah, you can go get your fourth outfielder in free agency.
Yeah, I mean, now we're talking. I think that's the kind of trade that would make more sense. Is like a contender overpays a little bit for Lopez, maybe, but feels like they really need that pitching.
Yeah,
doable. I don't think the Braves really feel like they need that pitching. The Mets have bought it mostly. The Blue Jays have bought it, and the Rays don't trade for it. The Red Sox, would they trade for Pablo Lopez?
Maybe.
I don't know. I don't think so. We're running out of contenders here for this. Mariners?
Wait a minute. Everybody needed pitching like 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, but they all want to do it cheap with money, I think.
Right. What teams have something extra? Well, the Mets have a little bit of extra stuff they could possibly give up. They have bats.
Yeah. Do they play center?
Well, no. They had that same problem. They didn't have anyone that could do it. So
Padres. Grisham for Lopez.
Nah, they're not doing that, I don't think.
Nah.
Well, plenty of time to speculate on moves that could happen in
But I think
future
that it also
episodes.
illustrates the fact that like everyone's like, oh yeah, the Marlins are going to trade, pitching for a bat, and then you kind of try to drill down. You're like, really? And who's going to trade with them, and what are they going to give them?
Yeah, a Brandon Marsh deal. I mean, I would actually like that for the Marlins. That'd be smart.
Oh, I would do
their
it for the
part.
Marlins in a second. I think the Angels might not do that.
You may have to give something else if you're the Marlins to get a deal like that done. The Sandy Alcantara extension, by the way, 5 for 56, buys out 2 years of free agency. I know you've liked Sandy for a long time, so I imagine you feel great for the Marlins having him there as long as possible.
Seems team friendly to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I would say that these extensions that we've seen, a lot of them are team friendly. I think Wander Franco did leave some money on the table. But one thing I would like to point out in respect to like Tatis and the $300 million shortstops, Wander has not exhibited that type of power yet.
Right.
He's a really good player in all regards, but in terms of like batted ball oomph, in terms of exit velocity, that sort of stuff, hasn't really shown himself to be at the $300 million level. So maybe this $200 million level is perfect for him. Maybe that's just what the market reflects. What was the other extension?
Buxton.
I think that one is incredibly team friendly. However, I didn't see the details before I tweeted about it because this is in one of those cases where the incentives are actually pretty intense and
actually good.
Yeah, and he could get himself just with like plate appearances. He's got about 2.5 million per season on there. So that's another, 15 million he can make just by being healthy. And then he has MVP finishes in every season. And he is of the type of quality where this isn't a pie in the sky thing. This is like, oh yeah, Buxton in a healthy season could put up 7, 8, 9 WAR and be a finalist. And if he's the 7th in the MVP or something, he gets like $3 million. So now you're talking about like, no, we paid a baseline, but we gave really good incentives in there. And if he is healthy, he's going to still be paid, something like $20 million in a season. He can make $20 million in a season if he's really good. And then he bakes in a sort of $10 to $15 million every season.
I think the Buxton thing is interesting because in some ways with his plate skills profile, there's a lot of Javier Baez in the how will he age as a hitter question, right? A 25-ish% K rate these last couple of years when things have been going well from a power perspective. It's only walking about 5 to 6% of the time in his better years more recently. So you look at that and you say, okay, like that's probably not going to change much. He's had enough experience in the big leagues, over 1,700 plate appearances. This is largely who he is from a plate discipline perspective, but he's doing so much damage when he makes contact, and he's such a great defender in center field. You take this chance all day long if you're Minnesota. I like that there's incentives in there for him for staying healthy. His track record, unfortunately, is like a mixture of the kind of chronic stuff, but also it's bad luck stuff tacked on top of that. Right?
Yeah, both.
We talked about the collision in the outfield that was back at AA. Outfield collisions, hit by pitches, balls off the angle. I mean, like some of that stuff, there's no way to predict that. None. I don't think hammering a ball off your ankle and missing months because of that's not really your fault. That's just it's an accident. It's an unfortunate thing that happens. So how much do you believe in Byron Buxton, massive damage power hitter? Like, how are you convinced by what we've seen kind of going back even as far as 2019 now? He said a slug over 500 going back to 2019. Is this really a 30 to 35 home run bat if we do see him stay healthy for at least 140 games over a season?
Yeah, and I think he shows a little bit of the usefulness of max EV or max exit velocity as a raw power metric because he's always hit the ball really hard in the maxes. So even in 2016, he had a 111 max, which is over that 108 threshold. 2017, 111 max. It's gone up now. Last season was 116 max, but he's always had really good max EV, and the barrel rates finally sort of rose to meet it by finding a way to make that max power. Make that max EV swing, lift it a little bit better. In terms of barrel rates, it goes back to 2019 now, where he's had better than a double-digit barrel rate, and double-digit barrel rates are elite. So to me, the power, I believe in it. And then the only one thing I wanted to add on top of this is his chase rate is not Bayesian. He actually chases the pitches outside the zone at a league average rate. So I think that he's an aggressive hitter that doesn't get to walk counts because he's swinging a lot, but it's not swinging willy-nilly. He actually does have a decent sense of the zone. So I honestly think that he has an MVP season in him. That I see that as still a possibility. And so to sign a guy who could give you an MVP season for $100 million, I think you got to do it.
Yeah, I've been a Buxton truther for a few years now. There are more people on board now than there were a couple seasons ago. He's up to a 68 ADP. That's over just a couple drafts that were last week.
He's burned so many people, though, with the injuries over the past that you have definitely people in the room who are whatever the opposite is of a Buxton truther who will never own him because they're still mad about, some season he tanked.
Yeah,
for them with injuries.
Deniers, I guess they'd be.
Yeah.
He was 9 for 10 as a base stealer in 2021 as well. So it's not like the power has made the speed just totally disappear. Like, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I know it's not fair to just double up numbers from less than half a season and say that that's who he is, but that's a 40-20 pace. How many guys can do that? That's a very short list of players. So I'm in on Buxton in the pick 50 to 75 range where he goes. Like, the specifics probably depend on the foundation. I like this for the Twins. I hope he reaches all the incentives and maxes it out to whatever the highest possible total of that deal can be. And I'm glad he's staying in Minnesota too, because it just seemed weird that he would be traded right now and end up having to get this sort of deal from somebody else. The Rays,
they have a really exciting outfield coming up with Larnach and Kirilloff, I think. The infield is a little bit more of a question mark, but even with Miranda there, they have some youth and some exciting stuff. They've got it's all about figuring out the starting pitching. Josh Kalk has got to be he's got to consider himself on the hot seat. He came over as a pitching guru from the Rays into that front office, and the pitching has been a problem.
Yeah, you mentioned the Wander extension. I mean, 11 years, $182 million, not as far into his career as Tatis was getting that deal either. So there's that has to be at least factored in a little bit too. But the Rays have been pretty busy. They've added Corey Kluber to the mix. 1 year, $8 million.
They're so funny because they're like, this is our playbook. Everyone knows it, and we're just going to keep doing it, and no one stops us. Like a lot of people are copying them, and that's made it harder for them to get the $1 and $10 million. The first time they did that, it was like Charlie Morton, and everyone's like, "Oh crap, let's do what the Rays did." And now they're now they have to get Corey Kluber, but Kluber was pretty good when he was in, and I've counted him out too many times too early. So he's a perfect kind of player that can maybe pitch them 50 or 100 innings early on, and then a young guy takes over for him.
Yeah, and he's got more of the deep arsenal approach as opposed to the
more change-ups
lights
than
up
ever.
The radar gun. So yeah. I do like that just from he's making some adjustments perspective. No one ever throws stones at the Rays for the moves they make. No one's going to question 1 year, $8 million for a pitcher, especially in this market when you're seeing what multi-year guys have been getting.
And you heard me sort of list how ugly it gets right now. Like them taking Kluber actually took a big chunk out of what's available,
Mm-hmm. Well, and Michael Wacha, who was there, goes with Chaim Bloom to Boston. He goes there, and it's like, well, look at what they got from Wacha last year: 124 and 2/3 innings, a 5.05 ERA and a 131 WHIP. I think Kluber is probably better than that. Like, I was actually surprised that Wacha went to Boston. Like, do you see him as a back end glue guy, source of innings if you need it, or do you think we're at the point in the career where we're finally doing the Michael Wacha is a reliever thing?
Yeah, I can't tell. Pitching Plus has always liked him better than his results. He shows good location. One thing that happened was he turfed the cutter, which is a poor pitch for him in the last sort of 5 to 6 appearances, and without the cutter, he had like a 98 stuff plus. So maybe they're making a bet on the post cutter version of Wacha. Maybe, and this is my personal theory on him, is that he's going to be just like a 3 inning guy. And so they are fine with him not throwing his cutter because they're like fastball changeup, 3 innings. Thank you very much.
Yeah, maybe they'll
Maybe
use
4
him.
innings.
Maybe they'll use him the way they used Tanner Houck at times during the regular season this year, and then let Houck just be a regular starter.
Yeah.
That'd be a good
and
recipe.
at the price, this is the lottery ticket portion of the schedule. Everyone is going to take a 1-6, 1-7, 1-8, even a 1-10, and put them in their starting rotation and hope it works out. And if it doesn't, it was just 1 year. It was just $10 million.
Yeah, Pirates.
I mean, what did they pay? What did they pay Cole Hamels to throw one bullpen?
That was pretty weird in hindsight. Pirates getting in on the fun too. Jose Quintana gets a 1 year, $2 million deal to go to Pittsburgh, and Yoshi Satsugo, who started to, it seemed like, unlock some things with the Pirates, goes back on a 1 year, $4 million deal. Like, the key for me with Satsugo, he can play a lot there. And in Tampa Bay, it was, a large side platoon role initially with the Dodgers for the brief time he was there. It was kind of like how is he going to fit here as more than a bench piece? At least with Pittsburgh, they can play him as much as he needs to be played based on performance.
Pittsburgh, it likes people like to make fun of what's going on there and what's happened, but this could come together really quickly because I love O'Neal Cruz and I love Brian Hayes. And when you have that on the left side of your infield, and then you have competence like Brian Reynolds in center, and then I think Stallings behind the plate is pretty competent too. So you've got competent veterans in certain places. You've got the exciting stars in some places. And you're starting to, do some depth signings and do some small moves here and there. I'm not saying that they're going to be good this year, but I'm saying they could be good sooner than people think.
Yeah, Roansy Contreras also.
Yes, Contreras.
Also.
We like Yahuré. So that's 2 young pitchers we like on that staff, and they're just going to bubble up to the top.
Yeah, Nick Gonzalez, probably not far away. Henry Davis, probably not that far away. So you're right. Help is coming in Pittsburgh. Speaking of a former Pirate, briefly a Padre, Adam Frazier goes to Seattle in a trade, and I didn't expect him to be the guy he was in the first half of the season. Is he just kind of a plays everywhere sort of guy, or is he their actual solution at second base?
I don't know, man. It's not super exciting. It's a zero power kind of all contact thing that we're not doing that much in the game these days. But if it is part of a larger plan and he is the utility guy, like maybe a David Fletcher when you're using him best, then I kind of like it. You know what I mean? Like, I think a guy who can, especially in light of this idea of lineup diversity, just having a guy like him that's just could put the ball in play, sure. And then you just put him wherever you need him, second base, outfield. Dylan Moore is still part of it. Or you sign Story and you push Frazier into the outfield mix, or as the offensive platoon guy, the offensive utility guy.
Yeah, just make Story a second baseman now, and if you lose J.P. Crawford to an injury, who's a great defender, then you can just play Story at short and shuffle everybody around and fill in at second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the puns are going to be Frazier, insufferable for this.
Frazier to Seattle. But Frazier Story pairing is also kind of cool too, because of Frazier kind of mitigates some of Story's problems, in terms of making contact and stuff. And then Story is the much more impressive physical player.
Yeah. So there was their trade. Of course, Seattle was involved. I hope we get more. I hope
if they surprise us. If they surprise us with money, it's a middle infielder and a starting pitcher.
So we've struggled to kind of figure out like where the starting pitchers are going to go. Like, which one would they get? Who would they actually be after? Would they be in on Ray or possibly Stroman?
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, definitely. Why not? I think they need it. You push Marquez Gonzalez to second. You take some of the pressure off of Gilbert, and then you hope that your Kirby, your some of your minor leaguers start bubbling up in the back. I think, yeah. I'm trying. The only reason I hesitated was I just don't know which one fits them better. Maybe, I don't know, Ray. I don't
Kind of
know.
like Ray there a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. The infield defense is pretty good. I guess Stroman would be fine there. But I think they could use someone. I don't see Stroman as popping to ace level upside. I think he's just a really solid like 2-3 guy, you know. So Ray is interesting to them because he could, if he remains on this burner he's on, he has more upside. He could be more of an ace, and I think that's kind of what they need because Marco Gonzalez is kind of, a number 2 with innings and stuff.
Yeah, he's more of a bulk guy, and you could have Gilbert ascend to that level. George Kirby could be that kind of pitcher. I've seen some buzz around Matt Brash.
Brash's slider is so good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's enough to be a whole starter and everything, but it's a really good slider.
But he might be a back end guy with Ks, or like a 4 or 5 inning guy. I mean, there's a few ways that could work out and end up being a really good thing for Matt Brash. So we have set a record. I'm 99% sure we've never had a pod go an hour 40 before. So yes, over 100 minutes of goodness.
Yeah, and it's all goodness because the next pod might be. Well, actually, we'll have one more wrap up of all the moves on Wednesday, and then the Friday pod might be doomed.
I'm gonna need someone to just send me bags of cash to do more NFBC draft and hold leagues to bridge the gap through the lockout. Like I can't do one every week on my own dime. It will eventually just, destroy my bankroll. So if you have bags of money around that you need to make it go away, you can send those to me.
What are we going to do? What are we going to write about? What are we going to talk about?
Well, we get more holidays coming up, so we'll get more shows off. That might be the key. If we take the holiday shows off, like around the end of December, 20th or so.
You're giving you guys our playbook.
The lockout
you won't hear from us during the lockout. To me, it's not fun. It's not fun. The leaks, the ideas that they have are not fun, and especially ownership. They just seem to come up with a dumber idea every time. Every time one of the ownership plans leaks, I'm like, no. Why would the players ever do this? You want to lower the luxury tax?
Yeah, lower the luxury tax. Pay players by WAR. If you go negative in WAR, pay the team back out of your own pocket.
The owner gets money back.
Take out a high interest loan through the bank of ownership's choice to pay. No, it's like, come on, like get out of here with this nonsense. But before we go, if you made it to this point in the pod, thank you for listening for an hour and 40 minutes. I should have mentioned this a lot earlier.
Some sort of cookie.
We should have like a special gift we could offer you, but we can offer you a subscription to The Athletic for just $1 a month for the first year. It's the Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Everyone has a deal right now. This is our best deal of the year. We don't do this very often. theathletic.com/ratesandbarrels is where you can sign up for that. So be sure to get that, or tell friends. You got some friends that don't have The Athletic yet. $1 a month. I mean, come on, think about all the things you spend more than $1 a month on that you enjoy a lot less than you would enjoy a subscription to the site. And it's a good way to support one of your favorite pods. I'm not going to say it's your favorite pod. Maybe it is, but it's a pod that you listen to for almost 2 hours on a random Monday. We definitely miss doing the show though, because I think we sort of did a pod when we were having that beer. It kind of turned into like at least 30 minutes of Rates and Barrels before going back into just normal bar chatter.
Yeah, well, our pre-work done in bars. And then hopefully this spring, there's enough of a run-up for the baseball season that we will have those live shows in the Bay Area. So keep an ear out for that.
Excited for that possibility at this point, too. Definitely seems like something that we can get off the ground. On Twitter, he's at Eno Saris. I am at Derek Van Riper. Give Britt a follow at Brit_Giroli, and follow at Rates and Barrels on Twitter. Something cool could happen there someday. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to barrel up on the like button. We'd greatly appreciate that. That is going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We are back with you on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening.